The thing about living in a small Midwestern town is that you don't actually live, you circulate. You pass through the same places, same people, same checkout line at the Piggly Wiggly where Diane, who's been scanning boxes of Raisin Bran for 14 years, knows your buying habits better than your own wife. And if you're lucky, or extremely unlucky, you get the honor of being the main character in one of those polite, whispered conversations in the church parking lot that starts with, "Well, bless his heart." I wasn't aiming for that level of notoriety, but fate, as it turns out, had other plans. It all began on a Tuesday. A perfectly harmless, mid-tier, second child of the week kind of day. I was rotating tires for a buddy of mine when I got a text from my wife Victoria. It read, "Zumba ran late. Be home soon. Red heart." Now, I don't Zumba. But Victoria? She was a Zumba evangelist. Swore by it. Said it was the only thing keeping her from turning into a garden statue. She'd picked it up 6 months ago, started going 3 times a week, and let me tell you, she was committed. She had Zumba shoes, Zumba water bottles, and probably would have gotten a license plate that said Zumba 1 if Missouri DMV hadn't rejected it for reasons unknown. Anyway, that message wasn't anything special until I remembered something. And here comes the part that makes this story special, not suspicious. Victoria had already texted me earlier that day that Zumba was canceled because the instructor, Paula, had a dentist appointment. Now, Paula's dental hygiene is nobody's business, but she does tend to overshare. I once heard her tell Victoria she was getting a full root canal party, whatever that means. And Victoria had laughed, said, "No Zumba tonight, Paula's getting drilled." And that was the end of it, until suddenly, it wasn't. Naturally, I didn't accuse. I didn't suspect. I did what any sane husband would do. I got bored, and I got curious. So I drove to the rec center. Not to catch her or spy or anything. I mean, come on, I'm not a sitcom character. I just thought, maybe Paula's appointment got moved. Or maybe Victoria went to support Paula emotionally through her dental ordeal, which honestly would have been a first. I'm not saying my wife isn't supportive. She is, in that charmingly vague, "Oh no, that's awful. Did you try Googling it?" sort of way. But when I got there, something happened. There was no Zumba. The lights in the gym were off. The only people in the building were a few seniors playing very slow ping pong and one teenager selling protein bars for a school fundraiser who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, including prison. Still, nothing truly weird yet, right? But as I walked back to my truck, I noticed a piece of paper stuck under my windshield wiper. I figured it was a flyer, those church bake sale and probable cholesterol event type deals. But no, it was a crayon drawing. Yes, crayon. Orange and blue and green. A picture of a stick figure woman with big hair standing between 2 stick men. One had Jose written under it, and the other? Kenny. The woman? Victoria. Above them all, the phrase "Zumba champs forever." Now, let me clarify something. I do not know a Kenny. Not intimately, anyway. There was a Kenny in high school who once lit his locker on fire trying to impress a girl who went on to become an insurance adjuster. But I doubt this was that Kenny. This Kenny had abs, apparently, because the stick figure had an 8-pack drawn in purple glitter pen. I stared at the drawing like it was an ancient map. My first thought was, who in the world drew this? My second thought was, why does this look like it was done by a 3rd grader during a caffeine rush? My third thought, yes, it took that long, was, who the heck is Zumba Kenny? So I did some casual investigating, which, in my case, means going to the diner the next morning and asking around like a detective who's been demoted 3 times. And that's when things got interesting. Turns out, Zumba Kenny is not just a legend. He's real. Realer than I ever wanted him to be. Kenny Malone. New in town. Runs a smoothie truck called the Blended Bison. Muscles like a Greek statue and apparently the charisma of a game show host on Too Much Caffeine. Teaches a weekly advanced Zumba class on Thursdays for experienced participants. Victoria, it turns out, had recently been promoted to that class. Now, I don't know how one gets promoted in Zumba. There's no belt system like karate, but Victoria was apparently doing very well. The thing is, I wouldn't have connected any dots if it wasn't for the crayon drawing. Because a few days later, I found out who really drew it. Paula's granddaughter. She comes to the rec center after school and likes to draw pictures for people she meets. She'd made that drawing for her grandma's new gym friends. Which, if you think about it, is an adorably chaotic way to blow up a marriage. So what do you do when your wife is possibly Zumba flirting with a smoothie truck bodybuilder named Kenny, and the only witness is a 10-year-old with a crayon set? You do what any man would do. You sign up for Zumba. I showed up on Thursday in my old college gym shorts and a t-shirt that read, "Jose knows best," a gag gift from my cousin. I walked in, expecting to see Victoria freeze like a raccoon caught in a trash can spotlight. But no, she smiled, like nothing was weird, like I hadn't just walked into the scene of a dance crime. Kenny was there too, shirt slightly too tight, hair glistening like he'd just showered in confidence. He welcomed me in, clapped his hands, and said, "Let's move that body, brother." And I did. Badly. I moved that body like a broken folding chair in a windstorm. But I watched. And I saw the little glances. The way she laughed a little too long at his jokes. The way his hand accidentally brushed her shoulder when she didn't need correcting. And I smiled. Because now I knew. Not from a phone. Not from a message. Not from a perfume bottle or a love letter tucked under a mattress. From Zumba. You'd think I'd be angry. But really? I was amused. It was all so absurdly mild. No drama. No rage. Just a woman who fell for a walking protein shake and a man who realized his marriage might just be another item on a long list of things that needed rotating, like the tires I never got paid for. So there it is. The beginning of how I found out. Not with a bang, but with a cha-cha slide. It's funny how your brain works when something starts to go sideways. Some people freeze. Some people panic. Me? I alphabetize. Mentally, I mean. The moment I got back from that Zumba class, having clapped and twisted my hips for what felt like 73 consecutive minutes, I sat down on the living room couch and started categorizing my next steps like I was prepping for a home inspection. The living room clock ticked like it was mocking me. Victoria was still at post-Zumba smoothies with the girls, which was, I now understood, code for lingering in the proximity of Kenny and his ego. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly shocked. I was just curious, mildly fascinated, actually, like watching a raccoon figure out how to open a trash can lid. You kind of want to see how far they'll go. So I made a list. Not a metaphorical one, an actual one. I grabbed a spiral notebook from the junk drawer. You know, the one with 6 pins that don't work and a roll of scotch tape that might be older than our marriage. I titled the page, "Things that are suspicious but not quite illegal." Victoria goes to Zumba 4 times a week, even though Zumba is scheduled for 3 days max. She now owns 7 pairs of leggings, all labeled seamless and compression, which, from what I can tell, means they cost 3 times more than regular pants and are about 30% pant. She started saying things like energy shift and vibrations, and I don't think it's about earthquakes. Her Spotify playlist includes someone named DJ Lavaflex, which sounds like either a techno artist or a gym supplement. She now signs off texts with a pineapple emoji. This means nothing to me, but I've learned to distrust sudden changes in emoji usage. Clearly, something was going on. But that wasn't the discovery. Oh no. The real discovery happened in the most delightfully unexpected way, courtesy of our town's most underpaid and overconfident amateur theater troupe. Once a month, the community center hosts a local culture night. That's a grand term for, please watch our neighbors act out things they barely rehearsed while you try not to yawn through it. Victoria, who once compared Shakespeare to a man who really needed a blog, had recently taken an interest in attending. She told me it was for mental expansion. I told her that sounded like a euphemism for boredom. But sure, I went with her once. Sat through a 37-minute interpretive monologue about dish soap and gentrification. Clapped politely. Swore never again. So when she said she was going to the next culture night solo because I clearly didn't appreciate performance art, I gave her my blessing and a coupon for half-off tacos down the street, which I figured was a more productive use of time. But here's where it gets interesting. I was working in the garage that evening, trying to fix the busted radio from the old Ford that hasn't run since Obama's first term, when my phone buzzed. Not a call, not a text, a notification from the CivicCast app, which I downloaded solely to keep up with town council meetings and then immediately forgot about. Apparently, CivicCast had started live streaming local events, including Culture Night. Now, I didn't plan to watch it. I clicked on the app by accident trying to dismiss the notification, and suddenly, there it was, the grainy live feed of our town's multipurpose room, complete with bad lighting and someone doing a dramatic reading of their grocery list. Truly groundbreaking stuff. But then the camera panned to the audience. Because of course it did. And there she was, Victoria. And there he was, sitting right next to her, Kenny Malone, aka the Human Blender, wearing a shirt so tight it looked like it had been painted on with a roller. They weren't holding hands or anything so obvious. No, that would have been too easy, too clean. Instead, they were doing something worse, synchronized nodding, like they'd rehearsed it, laughing at the same beats, turning to each other with these soft, knowing expressions, like they were the only two people who truly understood the metaphor of a poem titled Ode to a Clogged Drain. Now, maybe it's just me, but if you're having an affair, don't go publicly laugh in unison at experimental theater. It's suspicious. It's also, frankly, a weird bonding activity. But what do I know? I was the guy sitting at home reassembling broken electronics like a divorced Radio Shack manager. I stared at the screen for a solid 5 minutes. Not because I was heartbroken. I wasn't. Not even jealous. No, I was just trying to figure out how Victoria had managed to make cheating on me look so cultured. Like she was auditioning for a new life in front of an open mic night audience. And here's where my discovery went from passive observation to full-blown enlightenment. 2 days later, I walked into the local pharmacy to pick up some allergy meds. Turns out Zumba-induced betrayal is pollen-adjacent. And who do I run into? Linda Broskin, 62, 3-time bocce league champion, and the kind of woman who can get information out of a locked box with just her tone of voice. "Oh, Jose," she said, squinting at me like I was an overdue library book. "I saw you weren't at Culture Night. That's too bad." Victoria looked radiant. And that skit with Kenny was just adorable. With Kenny. Apparently, the interpretive theater had a surprise guest segment. Kenny and Victoria read dialogue from some offbeat French play about soulmates reconnecting in a laundromat. There was even a pretend argument and a reconciliation. The whole town was charmed. Applause all around. One woman reportedly cried. So not only had she been stepping out, she was workshopping the concept of stepping out in front of the neighbors. I nodded at Linda, told her I'd catch the next show, and left the pharmacy with 1 box of Claritin and a sense of surreal clarity. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't the guy overinterpreting his wife's new interest in mid-tempo Latin cardio. No, I was the husband of the lead actress in a romantic comedy she forgot to tell me she was starring in. And that, folks, is how I discovered my wife was possibly romantically involved with a smoothie vendor/community theater enthusiast named Kenny. Not through texts. Not through perfume. Not through tears or yelling or a hastily packed suitcase. But through a crayon drawing, interpretive drama, and synchronized audience reactions. When you've reached the point where your marriage is being workshopped at a public arts event sandwiched between a harmonica solo and a dramatic reading of a parking ticket, there comes a time for action. Preferably before someone turns it into a podcast. I decided confrontation needed structure. If Victoria was going to rewrite our lives as a low-budget romantic dramedy with Kenny the Kale Whisperer as her co-star, then fine. I'd treat this like an exit interview from a job I didn't apply for. Professionally awkward, deeply uncomfortable, and probably involving someone pretending to take notes. I scheduled it for Saturday afternoon. Not verbally, mind you. I added a shared Google Calendar event titled Inventory Review. No one checks calendar invites unless they come from work. But Victoria? She RSVP'd, yes, within 5 minutes. Probably thought it was a new couple's growth exercise. She came into the living room wearing one of those relaxed faces people use when they think they're about to get away with something by acting like they're not. She sat down on the armrest of the recliner, because sitting in an actual chair would be too basic, obviously, and gave me that slight upward nod she now reserved exclusively for spiritual healers, yoga instructors, and me when I remembered to take the trash out. "What's this about?" she asked, brushing invisible lint off her leggings. I handed her a printed spreadsheet. Yes, a spreadsheet, with columns and conditional formatting. "Before we get into that," I said, "just want to confirm. You went to Culture Night alone, correct?" She blinked. "Yes." "What?" I tapped the spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, claimed activity. Column C, actual activity, verified through CivicCast, social media, or people who don't like her as much as she thinks. Column D, Kenny involvement, Y/N. Column E, witness comments. Her eyes scanned the page. "Are you serious?" serious enough to start sorting by Kenny's name. She gave a soft, empty laugh. This is invasive. This is math. You're confusing the two. She stared at it a little longer, then set the paper on the coffee table like it had mildly offended her. You've been spying on me? I've been spreadsheeting. Very different energy. Victoria crossed her arms, leaned back, and said, Look, Jose, I think you're jumping to conclusions because you're feeling uncast in the community play version of my own life. I interrupted. Yes, I admit, I am struggling with that. She ignored me, clearly sticking to a rehearsed script. We've been disconnected. It happens. People grow. Sometimes that growth looks like new experiences. I nodded. Would one of those new experiences be named Kenny? She hesitated. For a second, I actually saw the wheels turning. Like maybe she'd gaslight her way out of this. Maybe say, no, Kenny's just a metaphor. Or Kenny is actually short for Kennedy, my new mindfulness mentor. But no, she pivoted. I don't think this is a productive way to communicate, she said. This feels like you're trying to trap me into saying something dramatic. I tapped column D. Would you prefer I switch from spreadsheets to a bar graph? I could animate Kenny's appearances by week. At this point, she got up and walked around the coffee table once, the way people do when they're either about to admit something or pretend they left something in the dryer. You know, I think this whole obsession with Kenny is actually about your own insecurities. That was a bold take, considering I hadn't brought up Kenny's name half as often as she had in the last 2 weeks. Kenny this, Kenny that. Kenny's smoothie blend is just cleaner. Kenny's posture is so aligned. Kenny says magnesium deficiency can impact your third eye. I once made the mistake of asking where exactly the third eye was and was told, with great solemnity, it's not where, it's how. So yes, forgive me for being curious about the man who apparently opened my wife's chakra and maybe also her inbox. I took a deep breath. Let's try something simple, I said, sliding a second page toward her. This is a seating chart. She narrowed her eyes. A what? A seating chart. For culture night. See, I called CivicCast and asked if they could provide a floor plan. Very helpful folks over there. Turns out Kenny and Victoria weren't just audience members. They were listed as performers in the event program, which, interestingly, you said didn't exist. That doesn't mean. I also got a copy. You two are listed as lovers in laundromat, which, I must say, is bolder than I expected. Not even friends who fold. Straight to lovers. She rubbed her temples. Jose, it was just acting. Sure, just like community dodgeball is just cardio. People still walk away with bruises. There was a silence. Long one. The kind that usually means someone is mentally writing a follow-up email titled, Actually, I've been meaning to talk. Then came the moment. The pivot. Fine. Yes. Okay. I like Kenny. There. Happy. Is that a question or an announcement? She sat down again, this time in a real chair. It's not some big betrayal, Jose. We just connect. Emotionally. Spiritually. He gets me. Got it. So you're saying this was a philosophical connection performed in front of 37 people and one live stream. She nodded like I'd finally caught up. I grabbed the last page of my packet. This one was titled Proposed Next Steps. Bullet points. No drama. Just logistics. Separate laundry schedules. Rotation of shared car until formal decision made. Transparency on CivicCast appearances moving forward. Clarification on who owns the air fryer. Agreement not to restage emotionally loaded skits in shared spaces. She didn't say anything. Just looked at the list like it was a breakfast menu in a language she didn't speak. I don't think you're taking this seriously, she muttered. I looked at her. Looked at the charts. Looked at the woman I once trusted to keep our Wi-Fi password a secret. Now apparently rehearsing emotional betrayal in a fluorescent-lit multipurpose room. I'm taking it so seriously, I said. I brought charts. And that was that. No yelling. No confessions. No key thrown into a planter. Just 2 adults. One of whom had clearly chosen interpretive art and an enthusiastic smoothie vendor over basic honesty. The other who had chosen documentation. The problem with revenge is that most people go too far. They get dramatic. Fireworks. Public meltdowns. Some even take to social media with cryptic posts involving moon phases and blurry photos of feet at the beach. None of that interested me. I wasn't trying to win an Oscar for most devastated husband. I just wanted something simple, sustainable, and with measurable satisfaction. like returning an item after the return period and still getting store credit. After the confrontation, yes, I now refer to it with a capital C. Victoria walked around the house like she was one of those philosophical monks who've transcended petty human emotions. She'd float past me with a mug of tea she never drank from and say things like, "We're just in different stages of consciousness." I told her that if her consciousness had a return address, I'd gladly forward her mail. So, what's a recently emotionally relocated man to do? Step 1. I reclaimed the community board. Now, the community board at our town rec center is no ordinary bulletin strip with curled coupons for pest control and babysitting offers that are probably not legal. This one is digital, large screen, mounted on the wall, updated weekly by Donna Metz, a woman who treats the position of community events coordinator with the precision and formality of a Supreme Court clerk. I visited Donna the next morning with a USB stick and a pitch. "Donna," I said, placing a bakery box on her desk with exactly 3 lemon squares inside, her documented favorite. "How would you feel about a new recurring event series for adults?" She narrowed her eyes. "What kind of event?" I leaned in. "Community truth sessions." She blinked. "Like a support group?" "Not exactly. Think structured, themed honesty. Each session has a prompt. Everyone gets 2 minutes. No crosstalk. No interruptions. No judgment. Just brutal honesty. Kind of like an emotional open mic, but with a timer and folding chairs." Donna chewed a piece of lemon square and stared at the window like she was considering whether this would lead to lawsuits. "What would you call it?" she asked. I showed her the slide on the USB. "Tuesdays with transparency. An exercise in controlled catharsis." She nodded once and added it to the calendar. "First Tuesday of the month. Multipurpose room C. Same one where Victoria and Kenny had debuted, Lovers and Laundromat." Felt appropriate. Now, I didn't advertise it. That wasn't the point. I posted the digital flyer and waited. The first night, 6 people showed up. One man talked about how he'd been pretending to like shuffleboard for 8 years because his wife thought it was romantic. Another confessed that she fake laughed at her husband's podcast voice. A woman admitted to hiding library fines under her maiden name. It was beautiful. The second month, it tripled in attendance. Apparently, honesty is addictive when structured and served with weak coffee in styrofoam cups. And then, like a moth to her own spotlight, Victoria showed up. She walked in wearing a scarf that suggested she'd recently traveled, even though I knew for a fact she'd spent the afternoon reorganizing her crystal shelf. She gave me that neutral, enlightened smile and said, "I think this is healthy for you." "I'm just here to run the timer," I replied. Kenny didn't show, which surprised no one. That night's theme was unsaid things that should have been said earlier. You could cut the passive-aggressive energy with a plastic spoon. I waited patiently. I didn't take a turn. That wasn't my role. I was the host, the moderator, Switzerland with a clipboard. But here's where the revenge part starts to take shape. Not with grand gestures, but with structure, consistency, and a well-placed community initiative. After the 4th session, Donna pulled me aside and said, "Jose, this is the most popular program we've run since pickleball. I think we should expand." So we did. Fridays, post-truth journaling club. Sundays, accountability bingo. Alternate Thursdays, emotional boundary mapping, like Dungeons and Dragons, but with colored yarn and red flags. Within 6 weeks, Victoria's social calendar, which once rotated entirely around events where Kenny might be shirtless, was now being outshined by a man whose idea of excitement was organizing metaphor-free self-expression evenings with community regulation forms. I knew it was getting to her when she asked, casually, "Do you think it's exploitative to build a whole event around people venting?" "Only if the vents are commercial grade," I said. She stopped trying to attend after week 7, but not before the local paper did a write-up on how a quiet man started a loud movement. They called me an emotionally literate minimalist with an eye for detail and a disdain for metaphor. I cut out the article and left it on the fridge. Not taped, just magnetized loosely between the water filter schedule and a list of Kenny's smoothie ingredients that she hadn't bothered to take down yet. Still, I wasn't done. Phase 2. Reclaim the performance space. There's a small side stage at the rec center. Too small for theater, too big for karaoke, which meant it was always awkwardly underused. I requested it for a new program, solo dialogue night. No acting, just reading personal essays written anonymously by others. One reader, one spotlight, no props, no characters, just someone else's words, performed deadpan. I submitted the first essay. It began. My wife once said Kenny was spiritually refreshing. I looked up the phrase. Apparently, it means, makes me feel like less of a person, but with better lighting. The reader was a teenager named Caleb, who wore noise-canceling headphones during lunch. He read it with zero emotion, which somehow made it more powerful. No one clapped. They just sat in silence for a moment, staring at the stage like someone had turned off gravity. Victoria didn't come to that one either. But Donna said she saw her standing outside the rec center, pretending to check the event board. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's 3 events a week, a folding chair empire, and a spreadsheet of attendance trends. I didn't need to embarrass her. I just needed to build something better. Something real. Something that didn't involve smoothie slogans and interpretive relationship theater. She started spending more time away after that. Claimed she was exploring new frequencies. I told her to let me know when she found one with decent AM reception. She didn't laugh. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just giving the community a place to be honest. An honesty she once treated like a burden, now packaged and publicly applauded. It took me exactly 27 days to stop referring to the linen closet as hers. That's how long it took to stop ducking when I opened the door, half expecting a scented candle avalanche and a judgy yoga mat. At day 28, I realized I hadn't noticed the color of the bath towels in weeks, which I considered progress. You stop noticing the little things when you're no longer being audited emotionally. Victoria was still technically living at the house, but that meant something different now. She was there when she needed to grab her laptop or lecture me on why fluoride is a government ploy. Most of her time was spent elsewhere, presumably in the general vicinity of Kenny and a lot of floor cushions. Then came the storage unit. Not mine, hers. A 5x10 climate-controlled unit over on Riverside Avenue. She mentioned it offhandedly while typing aggressively into her phone. I'm moving some things out this weekend, she said, not looking up. I just need space for now. I nodded. How much space do broken dreams and vision boards usually take? She blinked, registered the sarcasm, then kept typing. Don't be petty, Jose. This is just temporary. Everything is just temporary when people are trying to transition out of responsibility. I once loaned a neighbor my folding table for a few days. It's been 3 years. He's hosted 5 birthday parties and a wake on that table. Still says he's bringing it back. Anyway, Saturday came. She was already gone when I got up. No note, no update, just her reusable water bottle missing from the kitchen counter like a deleted file. I took the time to finish cleaning the garage. Not out of symbolism. I just finally had the time to see how many of our extension cords were tangled into one massive regret. By Sunday afternoon, she returned. No fanfare. No exaggerated sighs. Just the sound of her key in the lock and a muted hey. She came into the living room where I was fixing a drawer that hadn't slid right since 2017. She stood awkwardly in the doorway like a guest who had arrived too early to a party that wasn't happening. I think we should talk, she said. That's bold coming from someone who just moved their belongings into a room with no plumbing. She didn't flinch, just sat on the arm of the chair she used to call her reading throne, despite only ever reading captions. Jose, she said, I know you think I've been dishonest. Victoria, I said, dishonesty isn't a theory here. It's not something we're waiting on lab results for. This is conclusive. You starred in the pilot episode of Emotional Departure, and now you're doing reruns. She breathed out through her nose, probably her way of releasing inner tension or signaling that she'd just remembered a podcast about compassion. I'm not going to defend what happened, she said, but I think you need to understand why it happened. I think you need to understand that explanations aren't coupons. They don't reduce the cost of what you took. She blinked. That's dramatic. No, I said. Dramatic would be me quoting your vision board from 2020 and asking if emotional authenticity included interpretive love triangles. Another silence. It was our new favorite language. She finally said, so what now? I stood up. Not to make a point. The drawer was fixed and I was done crouching. I've been thinking about that, I said. There's no handbook for when your spouse drifts into someone else's kombucha circle, so I made a plan. Want to see it? She gave me a look that said, I already regret asking, but nodded anyway. I handed her a typed letter. Not handwritten. I didn't want this to be one of those sentimental moments people frame and misinterpret as romantic. This was administrative. It read, Property Division Proposal, a working draft. You keep the salt lamp. I'm not emotionally prepared to share air with it again. The plant you named after your chiropractor can go with you. I've never trusted its growth pattern. I will remove myself from the couple's therapy gift certificate you bought, just in case. The air fryer stays. I've put in the hours. The green blanket? I know you think it's mine, but I only used it when you were cold and wouldn't get another one. Take it. Seriously. She read it silently. I could tell she wanted to either cry or yawn. Maybe both. Instead, she folded the paper carefully, which I considered more respectful than expected. You really think this is the end? She asked. I shrugged. You took the beginning and rebranded it. I'm just writing the next chapter in a font that doesn't need your approval. Her face did something in between frowning and pretending not to care. She stood up and walked toward the hall, then stopped. I didn't want it to end like this, she said. No one ever says they want things to end awkwardly with poorly coordinated furniture arrangements and sarcastic inventories, I replied. But here we are. She left that night. Quietly. No slammed doors. No emotional montage. Just the soft click of her shoes against the hardwood and the unmistakable sound of someone trying to make a quiet exit without packing all the chargers. That was the last real conversation we had. She left behind a few things. A bottle of energy mist, a whiteboard calendar that still read October, Reclaim Joy, and an open envelope with a business card for a breathwork facilitator named Daryl. I boxed it all, labeled it Miscellaneous Enlightenment. No one ever teaches you how to finish a marriage without chaos. They only teach you how to celebrate beginnings. Vows, cake, photos with forced smiles. But endings? That's all up to you. And my ending? It came with a letter, a drawer that finally slid properly, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when the story was over, I didn't need a dramatic finale. Just the truth, typed in 12-point font, and a community room already booked for next Tuesday. Monday morning started with the sound of my neighbor Terry attempting to parallel park for the 4th time in a row. This would have been irritating, but it had recently become a reliable signal that the week had officially begun. It also gave me time to finish updating the spreadsheet I'd been working on, titled Post-Victoria Adjustments, version 2.3. The earlier versions had been a bit optimistic, mostly because they assumed she'd come back for the humidifier. She never did. It was now permanently mine by abandonment clause. The house had changed. Not dramatically. It didn't smell like lavender anymore, and I hadn't been accidentally stabbed in the foot by a decorative seashell in at least a month. The book on intuitive journaling that used to live on the coffee table had been replaced by a copy of City Budgeting for Small Municipalities, which I picked up from the library after realizing I now had spare evenings and a slightly irrational interest in tax allocation. Some people go skydiving after a breakup. I updated my library card and signed up for a workshop on document scanning. A few weeks after Victoria left for the storage unit lifestyle, I received a voicemail from the facility. Apparently, she hadn't paid for her 2nd month, and since I was listed as the emergency contact, they thought I might know how to reach her. I didn't, and I wasn't about to chase down a woman who now posted about lunar cycles like they were part of her dental plan. I politely declined involvement. They thanked me and said they'd hold her unit for 10 more days before auctioning off the contents. I don't know what she left in there. Probably the vision board. Maybe the weighted blanket she swore helped her sleep better, but never used more than twice. Either way, it felt like a fitting metaphor I wouldn't allow myself to use. Instead, I focused on more practical things. The rec center offered me a small stipend to continue hosting Tuesdays with Transparency. Apparently, word had spread. People came from neighboring towns. Someone even brought a friend from a larger city, and they left saying, "This is weirdly honest." I took it as a compliment. Donna had me speak at the quarterly community council meeting about engagement and participation. I gave a short presentation called Folding Chairs and Why We Sit. Someone clapped halfway through, and I think they meant it. Afterward, a woman named Ingrid from the Historical Society approached me and said, "You remind me of my first ex-husband, but in a good way." Again, not sure what that meant, but I added it to the compliments file. I didn't miss Victoria, exactly. I missed not having to explain to people why she wasn't around. I missed not being the subject of passive curiosity at the hardware store. People meant well, but they always phrased things like I was part of a town-wide scavenger hunt for answers. Hey Jose, haven't seen Victoria at the wellness co-op lately. Yeah, she's exploring new spaces now, I'd say. Oh, like travel. Sure. If by travel you mean distance in the emotional sense. The conversations usually ended there. There was one final thing I needed to do. We had matching name tags from a couple's volunteer fair we attended 2 years ago. They were still stuck in the drawer near the front door, along with expired coupons and a half-used roll of stickers that said, "Good listener," in bold red font. I threw out mine. Hers, I took to the rec center and quietly stuck it to the inside of the janitor's closet door. No explanation. Just figured it was better off contributing to institutional irony than collecting dust at home. Life continued. The guy who delivers the mail stopped asking if Victoria was home. I started noticing new things about the neighborhood, like the fact that the mail carrier's route changed slightly every Thursday, and the woman on the corner who used to sell handmade scarves now apparently sold light bulbs. No transition. Just one day, scarves. The next, 40-watt specials. I bought one. Felt like a milestone. One Saturday, while waiting at the printer store because I decided it was time to start scanning all our old documents and digitizing my life like a man with too much organization and too little distraction, I ran into a man named Darren who remembered me from the interpretive theater night. He worked in building inspections and said, "You know, you've got a presence. You ever think about teaching?" I laughed. Told him the only thing I was qualified to teach at this point was how to recognize when your marriage has shifted from connection to performance art. He said, "Actually, that'd probably fill a room." I went home and started drafting a syllabus. Not because I was planning to teach a course, but because it felt like the kind of thing someone with closure would do. Weeks passed, then months. I didn't date. People asked, but I wasn't in a rush to audition for the sequel. Besides, I wasn't sure how to explain that my most recent relationship had ended not in shouting or betrayal, but in a spreadsheet, a folding chair, and a bulletin board update. Eventually, I started writing things down. Not feelings, just observations. I made a list titled, "Things That Don't Require Explanation Anymore." The air fryer placement. The empty space on the calendar where crystals used to be scheduled. My name tag that just says, Jose, and doesn't need a second line. Why I don't flinch when someone mentions Zumba. That drawer, still sliding perfectly. The house is quieter now. Not sad quiet. Just actual quiet. Sometimes I leave a chair pulled out in the kitchen, just because I can. No discussion. No passive suggestion about feng shui. Just a chair, left out, because it's Tuesday, and that's reason enough. Victoria texted me once. Just one line. "Hope you're finding peace." I replied, "I found the receipts for your breathwork classes. You were being overcharged." She didn't text back. Closure, I've learned, isn't an event. It's a collection of small, unnoticed changes that eventually add up to not needing to check the linen closet anymore. And that's where it ends. Not with dramatic exits. Not with revelations. Just a man, a spreadsheet, a library card, and a drawer that finally works. And honestly, that's enough. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel